Good morning and welcome to the second edition of Did You Know? A heritage blog brought to you in association with Chom FM, Pickering College Radio, and by the History Hound Presents. I'm the History Hound, and today we will be talking about the early history of the educational system in Newmarket. We'll begin our story in 1843 when the grammar school, a small schoolhouse on the northeast corner of Millard and Raglan, was established. And coincidentally, it still is sitting in the same spot today. Today it is a private residence. In 1853, there were 64 grammar schools in our province under the authority of the Council of Public Instruction. In 1871, the legislature changed grammar schools into high schools and decreed that only students who had completed public school were to be admitted to secondary education. We know that in 1876, the local attendance at the grammar school had increased so much that an additional accommodation had to be found. In 1873, the village council raised $6,000 to purchase 2 acres of land on the southeast corner of Pearson and Prospect Street. That summer, a 1-story, 3-room brick school was built facing Prospect Street. That was the first high school located in Newmarket. In 1891, a model primary school was built on the northeast corner of Prospect and Timothy Streets, comprising 6 classrooms. It was to be named the Alexander Muir School. The school was closed in 1976, as many of you will remember, and demolished in 1979. There was a little bit of a commotion in town with efforts being made to keep the Alexander Muir School, but unfortunately they were not successful and it was torn down and has now become a senior citizens residence. On the night of March 16th, 1893, the high school on Prospect Street was destroyed by fire. The flames were fanned by particularly strong March winds that year. The students would have to use the Alexander Muir School until a new high school was opened. The whole concept of the high school burning became a very frequent occurrence. A lot of people wonder why the yearbook at Newmarket High was named the Phoenix. The reason was that that particular school was frequently burned down and then rose out of the ashes to be rebuilt. So that maybe a lot of people don't know that. Immediately plans were made for a replacement, and on the 15th of July of 1893, the cornerstone was laid on the new building, which was a 2-story school with 4 classrooms, and it was built on the same piece of land. The central portion had 2 staircases, one for boys and one for girls. That was a very common situation back then. I'm not really sure the logic for it, but they always encouraged the boys and the girls to enter through separate entrances. I guess they thought it would be more rurally that way. In 1912, an addition was placed on the east side of the building with 3 more classrooms on a 2nd floor, and an auditorium on the main floor was built. Blackboards were installed in 1923. Previously, they used to write on painted plaster walls, which most of us find absolutely incredibly weird, but that's exactly the way they used to do it before blackboards. Also in 1912, a new school arose on the corner of Church Street and Park Avenue to replace a wooden model which had been there. It was called the Model School, and I have written articles on that particular school, so I would suggest that you might be interested in reading some of the articles on all of the histories of most of the schools in Newmarket. On Newmarket Today, you would go to newmarkettoday.ca/remember this. And you can read articles on most of the schools that we're going to talk about today. So this new school that they built on Park Avenue at Church was called the King George School, obviously to honor King George, who was the king at that time. It's interesting, when they built the King George School, they used exactly the same plans as they had used for the Stuart Scott School. The town and the educational board had purchased plans from the federal government for the Alexander Muir School, and the plans were interpreted by a gentleman named Mr. Tench, and he designed the school at Alexander Muir, and those same plans were to be used twice again in the future, once for the King George School and once for the Stuart Scott School. So we got our money's worth. We got 3 schools out of the same plans. In my article on the history of Pickering College, I tell the story of how a fire at the original Pickering College, located in Pickering, Ontario, had caused the school to relocate to Newmarket in 1906. On June 20th, 1926, the cornerstone was laid for the Sir William Mulock for another addition on the west front section of the high school for a new auditorium, a gymnasium, and 3 classrooms. It was opened in December of 1926. Again, fire destroyed the old portion on March 31st of 1928, but fortunately part of the new addition was saved. Plans were made at once for a new school, and students were accommodated at the Stuart Scott School while they were building it. The official opening of the new high school was held on the 4th of February 1929. I should mention that while the students were moved from the high school over to Stuart Scott School, that was facilitated by the fact that the Stuart Scott School had been built in 1923 as the 3rd major school in Newmarket. It was built, of course, for those who don't know where Stuart Scott is located, it was built on the east side of Lorne Avenue, just a little bit north of Eagle Street, and it's still there. In fact, it's celebrating its 100th anniversary on the 10th of June. So for anybody who's interested in going to that ceremony, I would welcome you to attend that. Now, a couple of things that we should discuss about the original grammar school. First of all, as I alluded to, the grammar schools were considered in its time to be the high school. The grammar school that is currently located on Millard Avenue and still is there today, housed most of the main and famous people who grew up here in Newmarket. It was the home of Sir William Mulock. Sir William Mulock attended school there. We're very fortunate to have copies of the report cards for Sir William Mulock. Now, for those people who don't know who Sir William Mulock is, Sir William Mulock was our Member of Parliament for, probably well over 40 years. He was a federal politician. He held most of the portfolios within the government. He became very, very famous, and I would suggest if you're interested in Sir William Mulock, you should again read some of the articles that I've written about him on Newmarket today. But he attended school there. It's interesting. He went on to be a great, great man. The fact that he's Sir William Mulock, he was knighted by Queen Victoria, indicates that he did a lot for Canada and for the world. But it's interesting to take a look at his report cards. And his report cards, apparently he was a very difficult child and very difficult student. His report cards indicate that he was constantly being set aside, as they used to say, for behavior unbecoming a student in an institution. And it's also interesting to see that the teachers had said that he probably wouldn't become much in life because he didn't have much interest in the academics that they were presenting for him. Ironically, he became the Chancellor of the University of Toronto, along with so many other things that he did. So it just goes to show you that not being a good student in the early days is not necessarily precludes that you're not going to do well in life. One of the reasons that Newmarket started to expand and build more educational institutions was that the town was growing. We were extending our borders, and it was necessary to build new schools to accommodate those new children. Now, going back to the high school, at the time both commercial and academic courses were being taught there. In the 1920s, the student enrollment at the high school was approximately 300. Also at the high school, in the 1940s, they had courses on how to become a soldier. So they had military training at the school. This was, of course, ramped up in 1941 when training from the military camp that we had located here in Newmarket, where the fairgrounds is currently located, was opened. They would provide education for the military camp and for the soldiers that were there. Now, one of the things that you would commonly see in the newspapers if you're doing research are headlines such as, "Our local schools have reached their full capacity." Both elementary and high school boards were desperate for additional accommodation, as I indicated. Stuart Scott School, which was built, as I said, in 1923, and the rebuilt high school in 1929, were the latest additions at the time to the town's educational system. It's probably a good idea to take a look at the education before the grammar schools came along. Education, and this is true probably for most places in Ontario, education was handled by the churches or by religious organizations. They were usually held either within church property, or they were held in private homes and supported by educational facilities. The primary church in Newmarket, the Church of the family compact, who ran things for, I guess, really up to the 1840s, was the Anglican Church. And so there were a great many schoolhouses and private schools that were being run by the Anglican Church. But the important thing to remember here is that early education was primarily was run by the churches. Now, the other interesting thing is that education wasn't universal. Education could be expensive back then, and a lot of people, of course, didn't have a lot of money to send their children to school. As well, being associated with churches, religion was not only academic, but it also purported to teach how to live a proper and moral life, and that was always from the perspective of the particular church that was offering the education. Also, we should remember that education was primarily for boys. Education for girls was not readily available. An interesting thing is that the Quakers, or the Friends, were one of the first organizations to see the need to educate girls. And in fact, the first educational facilities that opened their doors to women were provided by the Friends here in Newmarket, and also in Sharon through the Sharon Temple and Mr. Wilson's group. So that's, I think, is quite interesting, because first of all, people nowadays think that that education was open to both sexes, and of course it wasn't. And second of all, that it was universal, and it certainly wasn't. So, if your family was able to send you to school, you had a real head start on life. And again, we were primarily an agrarian society, and so the schools were seen as being really a liability to those people who were trying to farm. You didn't want your children going to school, particularly your male children going to school. It was expected that they would help on the farm. So, things have changed a great deal now. Also, too, just to note that school seasons, when school started, any breaks that you might get from school were predicated on the harvest and the planting of the crops. So, school found that it had to adapt to the needs of the population, who, as I said, were primarily agrarian. We'll take a little bit of a break, and we'll come back and continue our look at the educational system in Newmarket. Welcome back to Did You Know? I'm the History Hound, and we'll continue our look at the educational system in Newmarket and a little bit of its history. So in the section before, we talked a little bit about the town growing and the need for more educational institutions within the town proper. You remember that when we left the story in the first section, we had a high school over on Prospect Street. We had built the King George School, and we had built the Stuart Scott School, and we had built the Alexander Muir. So we had three public schools that were serving Newmarket proper. We also had, as I say, the high school. That was it. So By 1948, it was clear that overcrowding had created the need for new public schools. If we take a look at the birth records for 1946 locally, we find out that there were 506 births and 62 deaths, and the population had risen to 4,450 from 3,200, and was still continuing to rise. Of course, the war had ended, so most people probably kind of chuckle when they look at the statistics, because there's a huge boom in births locally. There's returning servicemen, the return to peace, all of these things. I guess a strengthening economy caused the population to boom. So in 1949, plans were announced for a new school to be named the Prince Charles School on the south side of Shrigley Street, which was part of the former Stickwood Farm. It also was part of the military camp that had existed on that piece of land. For those people who don't know very much about the military facility that we had here in Newmarket during the Second World War, I would urge you to take a look at my articles on Newmarket Today on the military camp. And in the future we'll be doing, or I will be doing a little bit of a talk on the military camp. It's quite an interesting story, and it's a story that a lot of people are not aware of. It's also interesting that the school was named the Prince Charles School, given the fact that when I'm recording this, we're a day away from Prince Charles becoming the King of England. This was the first public school to be built since 1923. So as you can see, we were well do the building of a new school. The town had grown so much, and there was really nothing for students who lived in the western side of Newmarket. So you may want to read my 4-part history on Newmarket High on Newmarket Today if you have an interest in the high school portion of this talk. And as I say, you can read more about the individual schools on Newmarket Today in my articles. I guess by now there's probably well over 300 that you could read. On September 1950, tenders for construction at Newmarket High had been received, and they had set aside $95,000 for another expansion of the high school, and the new addition was opened on the 12th of October of 1950. So this is, most people who have a knowledge of the high school that stood on Prospect Street would have knowledge of this particular school. This was the school that remained up till its closure and moving over to Mulock. So it was the new addition was started on the 12th of October, as I say, of 1950, and it was ready for the opening of the September 1951 school year. This was the first addition to the high school, I might add, for about 14 years. So this construction was dearly needed. Prior to the 1950s, there were only 4 elementary schools in Newmarket. There was the St. John's Roman Catholic School, which had been opened in 1882 with the building of the Catholic school, or the Catholic church, I should say, in Newmarket. It was located over on Ontario Street, and at one time was just a building to the east of the church. So it had been established, and as you know, in this province, and it still exists today, we have 2 distinct educational systems within the town borders. We have a private, or I should say a public system, which would include, you know, the schools such as the Alexander Muir, King George, Stuart Scott, and we have a separate school system, and the separate school system by law would serve those people who were of the Catholic faith, and they added the school in 1882. We talked about the Alexander Muir that was built in 1891. The King George School, which was built in 1912 and took the place of a school that had been located there previously, a school that was wooden school, wooden frame school, I guess you would say. And it had been built because of the fact that population started to grow on the west side of Main Street, and it was necessary to have an educational institution on that side of Main Street to cater to the children who were now living on that side. We have the Stuart Scott School, as I say, that was built in 1923. The influx of developers and speculators that resulted in new subdivisions being built and the agricultural land being gobbled up for new subdivisions turned our farmland into commercial opportunities for developers. And this, of course, brought people to Newmarket, the population to explode. And it was obvious that we were going to need new educational facilities for these people. The economy was changing from agrarian or farm-based to commercial and industrial, and the town council and the school boards were inexperienced in how to cope with the amount of change and the amount of growth that was happening. In 1955, Councillor Alex Belugan strongly opposed issuing permits for additional subdivisions until some solution had been reached as to where new schools could be located, whether they could expand existing schools in order to provide more educational facilities. He also was concerned with the fact that there was going to be, in his opinion, a booming rise in the educational tax, because the fact that we would need to build not only new schools but also to hire new teachers. He talked about this as being a burden on the taxpayer and the town economically. So, you know, back then, much like we have the same situation today, there are forces that arise that are concerned about the cost of new educational facilities, the bringing of current educational facilities up to code, to improve the facilities, and so that's nothing new. And back then, you have to remember the growth was so intense that we were going to need not one school, but a number of schools in order to make this work. Now, it's probably important to mention that history, as it often does, proved incorrect. The local education tax doubled in the next decade after he had spoken out about the need for new educational facilities, but was concerned about the costs involved. And if we take a look at the actual increase in taxes, it's interesting that in those 10 years, the educational tax was increasing at about 67%, which is a great deal of money, I guess, to a lot of people. Nevertheless, the town did extend its borders and more subdivisions did appear. A lot of people today sort of bemoan the fact that all this educational need arose from the fact that that local farms were being taken down and new subdivisions were being put up. But this is progress, and progress always costs us money. So one of the things that they had to do is to go out and find new parcels of land that would accommodate the new schools. And so quite often when there was a new development that was being built, facilities had to be found for a school, and that was one of the things that the developers were asked for, was land to be set aside for a school to be built to service the new children's population that would be part of that development. That was certainly the case when the J.L.R. Bell School was built in 1955, and when the Maple Leaf School was built in 1959. Land was put aside by the developer and given to the town for the building of those two schools. Rogers Public School was built in 1963, Meadowbrook in 1967, and Fairmead in 1961. So in all of those situations, land was donated, if you want to call it donation, by developers. In fact, it was just part of doing business in Newmarket, but the land was given to the town, and new schools were built. Now, going back to the high schools, it was clear in 1960 that there was a need for more facilities for high school students. And the big question was whether they were going to enhance Newmarket High or whether it would be wise to look at building another school which would accommodate the high school students in parts of the town, and whether it would be advisable, if that was the case, to look at doing some other things within the confines of a new high school. And when we come back after our break, we'll take a look at how that was to unfold. Welcome back to our program. I'm the History Hound, and we continue our look at the early educational system here in Newmarket. So in our last segment, we talked about the year 1960 and the realization that there was a need for a new high school. And as I said, there were many questions that they wanted to address with the building of a new high school. One of the things that they wanted to address, and this is an issue that had existed for quite a while, was should we have a separate school for commercial training? Not everybody needs to go to an academic school, and this is one of the hurdles that they were discussing how to take care of that. And it was decided that what they would do is they would build Huron Heights secondary school, and it would become a commercial school teaching the trades and taking a burden off the existing Newmarket High. So in 1960, there was a request put forward by York County government to get financing. They were looking for $815,000 to construct a 20-room school in what was then East Gwillimbury Township to serve approximately 580 students by the year 1962. This, of course, was Huron Heights. A lot of people are not aware of the fact that to the north of Davis Drive was East Gwillimbury. It was not part of Newmarket. And so initially when Huron Heights was built, it was not technically within Newmarket. It was in East Gwillimbury. That was one of the reasons, I think, why it seemed appropriate to build a school there, because it could service not only the overflow from Newmarket, but it could serve those communities in Sharon, Hall Landing, that were located in East Gwillimbury. Once they received the go-ahead, negotiations began in January of 1961 to purchase an 11-acre site just north of Davis Drive. Davis Drive was at one time called Huron Street, hence Huron Heights School. It was part of a farm that was owned by a gentleman named Roy Watson. And that farmland was, the piece of land that they purchased was supposed to accommodate, as I say, the school and a new community which would be built surrounding it. That land, as most people know, borders on the east is bordered on the east by Bolton Avenue, and it stretches out to Leslie Street. Of course, the school took a small portion of that land. The rest became a new community which was built there. The scheduled opening for the school was September of 1962, and many of you out there will probably remember that the school was late in opening. There were all kinds of construction problems with building of the school, and in the beginning the new students had to find a place to go to school, and that turned out to be Newmarket High. And Newmarket High ran on a time schedule where half the students would go in the morning and half the students would go in the afternoon. And many people around town who were of that generation will remember sharing the high school up on Prospect Street. So there were delays in planning, and they were constantly changing the policy regarding the regulations that were being put forward by the federal and provincial governments for grants which were paying for this. Also, the discussion of what exactly defined a technical education was being re-examined through those years, and so needless to say, they were not able to open on time. Very early in the planning for Huron Heights, a lot of people don't realize this, they originally had the idea that it would be a secondary academic school. But once the school board discovered that both the provincial and the federal government would give much more money towards the building of a high school that was dedicated to technical studies, magically they decided that perhaps Huron Heights could become a technical school. And I think, in hindsight, it was an excellent choice. Huron Heights, from oral history interviews that I've done, is a great success. A lot of people have graduated from there to wonderful futures, and I think the school itself has got quite a rich history to it. So I mentioned that the schools, because the school wasn't open, they had to operate two school shifts at Newmarket High until Huron Heights was opened. The morning shift was from 9 a.m. to 12:40, and there were 560 students that attended at that point, and 31 teachers. And the afternoon shift had 648 students and 33 teachers. The principal at that time was J.R. Lockhart, and he supervised both of the schools, not only during the time that everybody was at Newmarket High, but also after Huron Heights was finally opened. He split his time between the two schools. By June of 1963, the new Huron Heights was sufficiently completed for the students to write their final exams. In September, the school was fully occupied and officially opened on October the 30th, 1963. The cost of the school had increased, of course, because of delays and because of inflation, I guess, and was now pegged at $1.5 million. The province paid $1.1 million, and the York County Board of Education was on the hook for the other $400,000. And it's interesting, we talk about the growth that was taking place in Newmarket. Even before the high school was completed, that being Huron Heights, plans were underway to add another 23 rooms to Huron Heights. So it was clear that there was a growing need for more educational resources within the town, and building a new high school didn't necessarily mean that they were finished. So eventually another 23 more rooms were added to the Huron Heights. Tenders were opened in September 25th of 1964, and the final approval was received by the following November 20th. For the extension to Huron Heights, adding another 23 rooms. This would double the student accommodation from 610 to 1,190 students, and that was to be completed by September of 1965. A further extension of another 29 rooms was planned for 1967, and it was actually completed in 1969. And at the same time as that was completed, they began to make plans for 7 more rooms for business and commercial classes, 10 more rooms for academic purposes, 4 new rooms for labs, 3 geography, and 5 standard classrooms were also added. So it looks like the building was never ending. With the continued rapid growth in our population, one only has to wonder how many schools we're going to have to build. Many of you will probably be aware that we have new schools. The Dedison School opened. The Sir William Mulock School opened. We continue to add schools. We continue to expand schools. The population continues to grow, and the cost of education in Newmarket is, I would say, is probably out of control. And I indicated that I've done articles on the histories of the Stuart Scott School, the King George School, and the Bell School, along with several other schools, and we'll be doing an episode on those schools in the near future, so stay tuned for that. I thank you very much for joining me. I'm the History Hound. I'm always happy to talk history, and I'm hoping that this will become a regular occurrence, talking about history and reliving the moments from our local history. Till next time, take care.